We went in there, they got up. Paul forgot to mention that when the Gestapo put the gun in front of Ignaz Nacher, telling him, you signed the document, you can go to Switzerland, all this was recorded, and we have a copy. The Germans actually kept everything that was exchanged between Ignaz Nacher and the notary public and the interrogator. It's actually in writing. We found it in court, which is also amazing. So now we wonder, and I always wonder with Sebastian, how come Engelhardt Brewery never appealed? And the answer was they never appealed because they merged with Braun Brewer, which is one of the largest brewers in Germany, and they didn't want their stock to go down globally, where it was trading for beer, for wine, and they didn't want the competition to take advantage of the public relations. We got our first check of the first property that was sold, I believe, in 1999 or 2000. I was sick and tired of listening to Paul and Marc telling me, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see it. I got the check, and I rub it to them to this very day. That was the very first check. Now you can take over.
Okay, so he assembles all the heirs, pile of paper like this, okay? So now it's back to Queen Supreme with a motion to substitute executors. Now we're back in, this is a CLE, right? Now we're back in trust and estates. If you have to substitute an executor, you show that we did everything properly in the Queens County Surrogates Court, and we did everything properly in the Berlin Surrogates Court, and we make this motion to substitute executors. Okay, now the Dresdner Bank makes a formal motion, essentially to dismiss, although they didn't couch it in that language, but it was essentially a motion to dismiss. They didn't use statute of limitations. They didn't say the West German settlement governs everything. They didn't use the supremacy clause or federal preemption. All their arguments that they've been using all along, they don't use any of this. Their only argument is your work in the Berlin Surrogates Court was procedurally improper. So we get an affidavit from Sebastian Schutz. I did everything properly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, according to the laws of Germany. And it all goes before Justice Joseph Golia in Queen Supreme, and a regular motion part with 100 other motions. We don't even have oral argument. And a few weeks later, we get a one-page decision, despite, they must have had several hundred pages of motion papers, one-page decision. Complaint looks proper to me, case will proceed. So, complaint is sustained second time. Judge Lane sustained it in 95, Judge Golia sustained it in 99. So now, Yossi and Marc and I, we're really rather uncertain. Now, what do we do now? They never did answer our discovery to our satisfaction. The Holocaust Museum was unhelpful to us. The deposition didn't go well. Maybe we figure, look, Sebastian will win the German cases because they had a very good system as follows. When West Germany took over East Germany, they set up a law which said that everybody who has a claim from the Nazi era or the Communist era on any East German piece of land will be adjudicated in these tribunals that Yossi described. They were called Lehrhofs, which are like the nearest thing that we have here. It seems to be something like the part of the Supreme Court where they determine the validity of a deed, like a proceeding under the Real Property Actions and Proceedings Law. That seemed to be the kind of thing that it was, only there was an automatic lien for every claimant. And if you proved the lien, you didn't get money, but you got like the equivalent of a mortgage on the property in an unspecified amount, and the landowner had to buy out the lien if he wanted to do any development. So there was going to be no development until all the established liens were established, which I thought this is a pretty brilliant system for establishing disputed claims to land. So Sebastian was in the business of trying to sell these liens, and he was looking to sell them for the highest price. So our advice to Ronnie was, look, our American case is so tenuous, maybe you'll be satisfied with what Sebastian does. Maybe we don't have to do anything. So we're in the process of deciding this when I get a telephone call, July 13th, 2000, I'll never forget it, from Stuart Eisenstadt. Now, anybody ever hear of Stuart Eisenstadt? Okay. Stuart Eisenstadt, the Deputy Treasury Secretary of the United States. President, Treasury Secretary, Deputy Treasury Secretary, high up. calls me up. He says, "We've settled your case." I said, first of all, I didn't believe it was him. My secretary said, the deputy secretary's on the phone. I thought she said the law secretary's on the phone. Some law secretary is calling me because this is Mr. Leavitt, who you heard about. I think that some law secretary's on the phone. They want to schedule a conference or something. Turns out it's the deputy treasury secretary. So he says to me, "We've settled your case." I say, "You settled what case?" I don't have any business with the Treasury Department. He says, "Your German bank case. We've settled your German bank case." I said, "What are you doing with my German bank case? There's a New York State Supreme Court case that has got nothing to do with the Treasury Department." He said, "Well, we've made a study of these things, and you should call Mel Weiss." Anybody ever hear of Mel Weiss? Yes. He's a class action lawyer. Very famous, went to jail, came out of jail, made a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars. So I call Mel Weiss. I don't get Mel Weiss on the phone. I get one of his associates. And it turns out, after we went to the Holocaust Museum, remember that, 1996? Leavitt and I went on Amtrak to the Holocaust Museum. After that, there are 56 other cases based on these theories that we came up with all around the country. And the German government went to the Treasury Department and said, "Look, we don't think we're going to win these cases. There's a lot of money involved. It could disrupt our economy. Help us." So they have a whole powwow in Berlin. They send Professor Bert Newborn, Professor Bert Newborn of the NYU Law School to represent the United States. And they work out not a treaty, but an executive agreement to settle all these 57 cases. This is all unbeknownst to us. So the Dresdner Bank then sends us the executive agreement, which is signed by Stuart Eisenstadt and President Clinton and the Chancellor of Germany and a bunch of other countries are involved in this. And we see in the back there's a schedule of cases, and our case was the first filed, and all the rest are filed after the date we went to the Holocaust Museum. So, and then he says, then Eisenstadt told us, the case has now been transferred to the U.S. District Court in New Jersey. How did that happen? What procedural device? Well, you remember the Supremacy Clause. This is about the best illustration of the Supremacy Clause you could ever have. The Deputy Treasury Secretary calls you up and says, "Aha, we are the supreme government over your government, your New York State government and court system, and we, the United States, have an interest in this, and therefore we are transferring this whole thing to the United States District Court, even though you didn't plead any federal questions." Remember in 1994, I said, "Aha, no federal questions. We are not going any federal anywhere." Well, once they signed an executive agreement, now there's a federal question. So now the Dresdner Bank, in cahoots with the U.S. Treasury Department, which I completely predicted 6 years before, go to the U.S. District Court in Brooklyn, which has the Queens in it, in its district, and then from there it's transferred to New Jersey because 27 cases are placed in New Jersey and the rest are placed in the Southern District of New York before Judge Cram, Shirley Wall Cram. So we talk about this, and we don't think this is such a bad idea. Maybe we'll get, we had 2 judges rule in our favor already. Maybe the judge in New Jersey will rule in our favor. So we decide, well, what is our procedural position? After all, we don't think we have a winning case anyway.
We get the money.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. So what's our procedural posture anyway? We don't think we have a winning case. We don't think we have the evidence. We're trying to squeeze a settlement. That was our idea from day one. Maybe the judge in New Jersey will squeeze some money out of them. We're actually pretty hopeful about this. So I call up no, it didn't go that way. He called us. We got called to a conference at the U.S. District Court in Newark, New Jersey. So we go into this conference, and all the lawyers for these other 25 cases are there, and all the lawyers for all the major German corporations that provided the munitions and all the supplies for World War II are there, and everybody's there. And I stand up and I say, "This is the accounting for World War II." Oh, you could have heard a pin drop. This was a dramatic moment. I'll never forget it. Anyway, so then he calls us in the chambers, and we say we want to be sent back to the New York State Supreme Court in Queens County. We don't think we belong here. We didn't plead any federal questions. This was all after the fact. It therefore doesn't count. The United States manufactured its interest in the year 2000. We filed the case in 1994. It was a continuing tort and crime in New York in 1994. The federal interest did not exist in 1994. The case is between the estate of two old men and a bank with a branch in New York. It's a New York case. It's got nothing to do with the federal government. Well, that didn't go over that big. But he did entertain it enough to make the Dresdner Bank, think about it. They still aren't offering any money. So he decides, well, okay, we'll see what's going to happen next, because what the government was proposing was a settlement structure for the whole thing, where a global settlement where every Holocaust. Well, I should get up to that. The judge said to me, "I'm going to send Bert Newborn to see you." So Bert Newborn, in October 2000, he comes to our office, and he's surrounded. That is, I'm sitting at my desk, Yossi sitting here, Marc is sitting here, and Bert Newborn is sitting here. Bert Newborn is representing the United States, and we are representing Mr. Nacher. But in my mind, we're representing the 292,000 soldiers, we're representing the 6 million Jews, and we're representing the 60 million people who died. And he's representing the people in power in Washington today. So, I think we have the moral high ground. So he says, well, this was the biggest thing in my life. They sent me to Berlin to negotiate this agreement, and I've settled this, and we're going to give every Holocaust survivor in the world $7,000. So I'm thinking, because we filed Mr. Nacher's complaint, ultimately now every Holocaust survivor in the world is going to get $7,000. This is actually a pretty good thing. A lot of these people are poor. And then but what about our client? I mean, our client lost multi-millions, so I'm not too happy about that. So he goes on and he says, look, I tried, it's a $5 billion settlement. And we tried to get $10 billion, he said. I was with President Clinton, he said, when President Clinton called the Chancellor of Germany and tried to get $10 billion, but he couldn't get it. And this is the best we're going to do. And if you try to litigate this in the U.S. District Court in New Jersey, and you lose, and you appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals in Philadelphia, while that's going on, these people are going to die, because it's now 2000. Most of them were born in the 1910s and 1920s. They're in their 80s. They're in their 90s. They're going to die before they get the $7,000. And in Belarus, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Bulgaria, all these places where these people live, $7,000 is a fortune. And you are going to stand in the way, pointing to the three of us. So now the tables are all turned around. We are no longer fighting the Nazis' bank. We are in a conflict with our own government. And maybe they didn't do such a bad thing.